So Oregon beat USC on Saturday, and it's a good win for the Ducks. It really kind of helps build their college football playoff resume. Not that they were in any doubt of making the college football playoff, barring a loss to USC or coming up next week at Washington. But it does give them something to hang their hat on because other than a win on the road at Iowa that's got 4 losses, and if you wanted to argue that the Penn State win is actually a good one because that was the first loss of 6 in a row for Penn State, I don't think Oregon had a super strong resume. I think you can see that their team is pretty good, but I don't know that you can sit there and argue that, well, they've got to be in the playoff because they've done XYZ. I don't think they have that on their resume until they beat USC. Now, I know that the immediate reaction might be, well, yeah, that's not a very good USC team. I disagree. I think it's a pretty good team. Is it college football playoff caliber? No, but it's still a top 25 win and should count as a top 25 win. But after the game, Dan Lanning took a shot at SEC schools for saying, hey, this is a good win. That's a very good team. We're not playing Chattanooga State like some teams are. And I get it that of the 8 SEC games that happened on Saturday, only 4 of them were against Power 4 teams in conference play. You look at some of the teams that were on the schedule for the SEC on Saturday, it's not Murderers Row of Samford, Charlotte, Eastern Illinois, Mercer, Western Kentucky, Coastal Carolina. Those are not juggernaut programs that you can pound your chest about playing. And I think every year, I think it dampens the idea that the SEC is the gauntlet that oh my gosh, the SEC schedule is so difficult. Therefore, they should get a pass for playing the Eastern Illinois, Mercers, Western Kentucky's, Coastal Carolina, Samfords of the world each Saturday before Thanksgiving. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that they can both say that the strength of schedule is, oh my gosh, nobody else could do this, while simultaneously playing weaker teams, or in some cases, FCS teams, before the most important week of the season. I think that's a really difficult argument to make. I also think it's a really difficult argument to make from Oregon's perspective or Ohio State's perspective, because they're guilty of the same thing. It's just where those things fall in the schedule. Oregon opened the season against Montana State, an FCS opponent. Is Montana State one of the best FCS opponents? Yes, they are. That doesn't negate the fact that they are an FCS opponent. Ohio State played Grambling State. They just did it in September instead of November. I don't think that there's really much of a distinction there. I don't know that you can sit here and pound the table and say it's so much worse to do it in November than it is to do it in September. I think that it's the same thing, just happening at different times. And so it does feel somewhat hypocritical for Dan Lanning to sit there and say, well, we didn't play Chattanooga State. Yeah, but you played Montana State earlier in the season. I don't think you can knock them for playing Oklahoma State. Are the Cowboys terrible? Yes, undeniably. But when that game was scheduled, you probably doubt that Mike Gundy's going to get fired after you beat the piss out of them 69-3. Like that. I can't knock them for that, and I can't knock them for playing Oregon State. And I think anybody that is going to knock somebody for playing a yearly opponent in the non-conference, no matter how good or bad that team is, I think that sucks. I think it's stupid. I have argued this until the end of time. If you have a rivalry, for instance, if Clemson and South Carolina play every year, I'm not going to say, well, Clemson's got a weak strength of schedule because they played South Carolina. I think that's stupid. I think they should play that game every year. And that's not the only one. You get the Georgia Tech, Kentucky, Louisville. You go down the list. I like that those games exist. So I'm never going to hold those games against somebody that they happen to play, somebody that happened to stink, but they play year after year after year. Regionality is good for college football, no matter what maybe some of the power brokers might tell you. The idea that it needs to be coast to coast, where you are playing teams that Rutgers has no emotional connection to playing UCLA. I don't agree with that. I think that's the best thing potentially for TV, but for fan bases and for college football as a whole, I want Washington and Washington State to play. I want Oregon and Oregon State, Georgia, Georgia Tech, South Carolina, Clemson. You keep going on down that list. Those games rule, and I want them to continue to rule. So I'm never going to hold those games against somebody in their strength of schedule argument. I just absolutely am not. I refuse to do it. But I can hold you accountable for you're guilty of the same thing that you are arguing is a detriment to somebody else's schedule. And that I will have a problem with, because how can you not? It's hypocritical to say, we didn't play Chattanooga State. Yeah, but you played Montana State to start the season. I don't think it's any different just because it happens the Saturday before Thanksgiving and you did it on the Saturday before Labor Day. That feels incorrect, illogical, and I don't know how you argue any differently. Oregon got to start the season and work out kinks against a lesser opponent. And Alabama and Auburn and Texas A&M and South Carolina got to work out kinks before the most important week of the season. Is that a gigantic advantage at the end of the day? The answer, in my opinion, is no. It really isn't, especially when you're guilty of the same thing. And I think whether this is college football or life, if you have an issue with the way something is done, I think you can't then be guilty of that same issue. If your argument is, yeah, but they did it, okay, then have some principles and don't do the same thing that you are saying is bad. So if the Big Ten wants to sit in the moral high ground and stand on their high horse and say, hey, playing FCS teams is bad. It's bad for the sport. It's bad for strength of schedules. It's bad for the college football playoff resumes, etc. Then there's a really easy way to change that. Don't do it. Don't do it. If you want to have the ability to pound the table and say, these guys are doing things that we disagree with, that alters their win totals as a conference, that alters their win percentage, that alters their perception, then don't do it. Don't do it and harp on it until the end of time. If Oregon had replaced Montana State with Miami, with Florida, Boston College, any other Power 4 school that they could have felt pretty confidently that they would beat, I have no issue with Dan Lanning sitting there saying, we ain't playing Chattanooga State today. If Ohio State had scheduled anybody other than Grambling, even if it is an FBS opponent, another MAC school, a Sunbelt school, Conference USA, Mountain West American, you can sit there and say, we didn't participate in Chicken Shit Saturday any stretch through the season, whether it was the Saturday before Labor Day or the Saturday before Thanksgiving. If you think it's such a bad thing, then don't do it. But until you stop doing it, I don't think you can bitch about it, because Oregon and Dan Lanning are guilty of the exact same thing they're saying should be a detriment. It is a problem, but it benefits them in this case. So by God, they're going to pound the table and say, this is a really, really, really bad thing, and I can't believe somebody would do that. Well, you did that, and I don't see how you can see it any other way. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you get all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way to helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.